Relatives, this is Dr. H. Welcome to this week's Schlagbyte for the week September 17th, 2007, entitled No Child Left Behind Leaves Learning in the Dust. This is the second year I've accompanied my granddaughter to her high school's parent-teacher night. Last year I met her English teacher, Mr. P., a young man who captivated the room with his energy. He gave examples of how reading was the vehicle for exploring new worlds which could help us make sense of our own life experience. I loved his passion, his intelligence, his excitement, and the fact that he turned my granddaughter on to the richness and romance of literature made me indebted to him even more as the year progressed. This year, even though he was not her teacher, I went back to his room to thank him personally. I told him that his commitment to sharing his extraordinary gift for turning on young minds to develop a love for reading and to think critically was an act of nobility. He had my profound respect because he clearly wasn't doing it for the money, and he smiled and said that's almost as good as a raise. But he assured me that having students willing to think creatively and have their minds stretched was his greatest reward. I was less moved by charisma this year than I was by the preoccupation of the staff with the upcoming Ames test. High school sophomores take this standardized examination to prove their competence, and the results are used to judge the effectiveness of teachers, of schools, and they determine federal funding. Arizona has taken it a step further and has made it a high-stakes graduation test. Students, regardless of how good their grades are, will not receive a high school diploma unless they pass the Ames test. Funding for education now is directly tied to the results, which is another legacy of the current administration called the No Child Left Behind Act. Undoubtedly another feel-good title dreamt up by Karl Rove. I mean, how could anybody not support an act that leaves no child behind? However, in the eyes of many parents and teachers, it would more aptly be named the Leaving Every Child Behind Act. What was allegedly intended to ensure that kids would learn actually stifles meaningful learning. In the middle of this year's sophomore high school semester, regular teaching at my granddaughter's school will be interrupted, and the focus will become passing the test. Teachers assured parents that were gathered that last year nobody failed. The test itself has been widely criticized, having been developed without the input of teachers and has undergone numerous revisions at Arizona taxpayers' expense. Ames testing doesn't, by the way, start in high school. It begins in the second grade. The trickle-down effect can be seen even in kindergarten, which is now a full day, where kids in public schools have very little physical activity or recess, and the mainstay of their instruction is canned worksheets. A close friend's first grader missed one day of school last week and had 12 worksheets to make up. The concept of developmentally appropriate practices and the recommendations of the National Association for the Education of Young Children has been cast aside. If the sole aim of education is to pass a single test, then the Ames test works. But if the goal of education is to inspire a love of learning, to cultivate creative minds, and produce the great thinkers of tomorrow, then the Ames test will sadly fail. Inquiring minds do not want the right answers. They want to be encouraged to ask penetrating questions. The No Child Left Behind Act is coming up for renewal in the near future. Contact your senators and congressmen and encourage them to scrap it. Our students and teachers and the country deserves better. If we reduce teaching to providing the answers to tests, we will discourage teachers like Mr. P., whose joy comes from planting seeds of discovery that excite young minds. That's what I'm thinking this week. Let me know what you're thinking on the Healing Cafe discussion forum. And for those of you excited by some workshop possibilities, check the homepage on the website. a workshop with Patch Adams and many friends on changing paradigms of healthcare delivery, and in December, for the only time this year in the States, The Last Mask of the Authentic Healer, for those of you interested in healing both yourselves and others. Check it out. Have a great week. Remember, we're all connected. Nobody makes it alone. I say this for all my relations. Mitakuye.